And good morning. It is, and Happy New Year. It is 11:31 a.m. here on Monday, January 4th, and Happy New Year, Frank.
Happy New Year to you, Ryan.
And here we are. We are kicking off our first interview of our author series that started way back in September, October?
Something like that, yeah. It's been a good series, and among other things, it really highlights a lot of the talent we have in Rhode Island and nearby communities. So we've got a lot of very talented people. This morning, Cornelia Dean, who started her journalism career at Providence Journal, comes out of Brown University, and she went on to the New York Times, where she was science editor of the New York Times. She's a distinguished lecturer and writer in residence at Brown, as well as still a science writer at the New York Times. She is under her tutelage. The science area of the Times did very well. Yeah, won lots of different awards. She's the author of 3 books, and pretty interesting. We'll talk to Corey about how she got into science writing, but she's written "Making Sense Out of Science," "Am I Making Myself Clear?" and "Against the Tide." Much of what she writes about, she talks about really translating science to for the average reader, for the average individual, people who aren't scientists, and also urging scientists to speak to people in general, and also a lot about climate change. But excited about this morning. It should be a good discussion.
And without further ado, before you use up all your time just introducing her, good morning.
Hi.
Nice of you to stop by, Corey.
Oh, Frank, I'm so pleased you asked me to come and appear on the program. It's I'm very happy to do it.
Well, it's good to have you here, and you've had a terrific career. Maybe you can start a little bit and talk about your journey to the Times, and how you got into science, and how you became science editor.
Well, so I was I never thought that that's what I would do. I thought from a very, very early age that I would be a journalist. I was an avid newspaper reader from the time when I was too small to hold up a broadsheet. I had to put it down on the living room floor and lie on the rug and turn the pages to read it because I couldn't hold it up. So I knew from a very early age I wanted to be a journalist. But when I moved from the Projo to the New York Times, it was as a more or less plain vanilla editor on the national desk. I did not anticipate, going into science. And what happened was, and this is literally true, I was moved to the science department because one day someone saw me walking across the newsroom carrying a copy of Scientific American. And that basically was it. Unbeknownst to me, there was a temporary opening in the department, and they were looking for somebody to fill it. And because I had demonstrated enough interest in science to be carrying a copy of the magazine, they sent me there. It was supposed to last for, I think, 3 months. And basically, I never left. I absolutely fell in love with the place. It was just the most completely fabulous place to work imaginable. I absolutely loved it. And they sort of had to drag me away for 4 years in the Washington Bureau. That's like one of these rotations that you sort of have to do at the Times if you want to continue clawing your way to the top. So I did that, and I was there for the first 4 years of the Clinton administration, where I had a certain amount to do with the healthcare coverage that involved Ira Magaziner, our fellow Rhode Islander.
Sure.
Anyway, but then I moved back to the mothership in New York to become science editor. And I was science editor for, I think, about 8 years. And that was just absolutely wonderful. It was fantastic.
Are you still writing for the Times, correct?
Yes. I'm writing. I did a few projects, actually obituaries of famous scientists, which we do ahead of time so that we're ready in case something happens and we need the obit. We had a man years ago who specialized in obits, and advance obits, we call them. And he became very well known because when you got a call from him, you knew why he was calling. And he had a little formula, which was, I'm working on a profile of you for use in the event it should become necessary. So that's what I'm doing. People that, I mean, I'm doing other things as well. I did a big story based in Newport on the difficulties of preserving historically important properties against sea level rise, which, by the way, is an absolutely intractable problem. But anyway, so I've been doing that, and I've been doing, I took a couple of assignments for other publications this year, which were interesting and fun and hard to concentrate on in the pandemic times for me anyway. And my big project is I'm working on a book on coastal land use in an era of rising seas, which is turning out to be, unfortunately for all of us, a more and more pressing problem. So that's my big thing now.
And you've published 3 books now, right?
Yes, this would be my 4th.
Tell us a little bit about the books and what motivated you for each one and what you hope people to take from them.
Well, so the first one is called Against the Tide, The Battle for America's Beaches. And it was published in 1999. And I was actually surprised because my editor at the publishing house said, the fact that you actually work for the Times when this book is coming out is not going to help you. In fact, normally it hurts you. They go out of their way to be mean to their own writers in book reviews. However, this book was favorably reviewed, and they named it one of the 100 best books of the year, which was very gratifying. And that book talks about basically beach erosion and what we are doing to try to preserve beaches in the face of it, and how, unfortunately, virtually everything we're doing is making a bad situation worse. And that book is still in print. And the mistaken ideas are still prevalent on the coast, and bad actions as a result of those mistaken ideas are still prevalent as well. And I'm sorry to say that there are plenty of examples of this in Rhode Island, which is.
And I was gonna ask that, and perhaps you can mention some of those.
Well, I would just say, I have taken students on a field trip that starts at Napatree in Watch Hill and just goes all the way across to Newport. And at Napatree, I don't know if everybody has been there, but it's a spit of land that goes out to the east from practically where the carousel is in Watch Hill. It's a park. It's public land. It's open. It's absolutely gorgeous. It's beautiful. And because it's allowed to move around and it doesn't have walls on it and all this other stuff, it's relatively healthy, and it can respond naturally to things like sea level rise. It's beautiful. Unfortunately, the next stop on this tour is Taylor Swift's house in Watch Hill, which I really recommend that everybody go and see, because it's a fortress surrounded by rock. It's like taking the building seawalls to way beyond its logical conclusion. And as a result, there's no beach in front of that house, and it's affecting the beach to the east of it. And then if you go along, you will eventually get to, I think it's Atlantic Avenue and the places that were so hard hit by Sandy. And what people seem to be doing there is armoring their structures with rocks or riprap or different kinds of armor, basically. And the result of that is, as the water, I have to do this backwards because if you put a wall down on a beach and the water is rising, the water is inevitably going to rise and hit the wall. And when that happens, your beach is drowned. You've lost your beach. So building armor on an eroding beach, I would say it is ordained by God that you're going to lose your beach. You have chosen your building, whatever it is, over your beach. It's my opinion that it's a very rare building that's more valuable than a stretch of beach. I'm a big fan of beaches. But at a bare minimum, people need to be aware of this problem and make the choice, thoughtfully when they decide what they're going to do or not do. And very often it means you have to accept that your building is going to fall in. And I guess at this point I would have to say, fortunately, have never been in a position to face that kind of a problem, because I've never been able to afford to buy waterfront property. So I can talk about it glibly, because it's never going to be my house falling in, because I don't have that kind of money. But obviously people don't want to lose their houses. But if you drive along, just drive along the coast from Watch Hill east to Charlestown, you'll see a lot of that. And then the next place we stop at a bunch of places, but one place that is extremely interesting to me is a place called Roy Carpenter's Beach, which is, well, you're nodding, you know where it is. So
Yeah.
it's, and Roy Carpenter's Beach is one of these little settlements where people, I think it might have started in the Depression as a way for the people who owned the land, which was a farm, to get enough money to pay taxes and maintain the farm in the Depression. I might not be completely correct about that, but in any event, that's the vintage of it. And so what happens is they laid out these little parcels, and you don't buy the parcel, but you buy your house that's on the parcel. And that is a very vibrant community of people in families who've been going there for decades, and it's a real community feeling and so on. But the other thing is, when Sandy struck, quite a lot of houses along the very, right on the beach fell in or were damaged and fell in. But the people could reestablish themselves further back because there was empty land on the farm. So people might not have a waterfront anymore, but they're just, a few hundred yards back. And to me, this is one of the places I want to research more deeply for this new book, because I think that kind of approach of being ready to adapt to changing conditions on the coast is going to be really important if we want to maintain any of the kind of lives that we've had there in the past. And then the last stop on the tour was the Point section of Newport, which is, by now I think my students are pretty discouraged, but anyway, and the Point section is in a way really discouraging, because when you have historic sites or historic properties that are in the way of rising seas, it's very hard to know what to do about them. And that's what this story was about, that I did, because lots of steps that are typically taken, like building walls around them or elevating, putting them on stilts, elevating them up, they alter, or they definitely alter, and they may actually destroy the historic character of the neighborhood that you're trying to preserve. And it's very hard to know what to do about this situation. And I don't think we've come upon a good answer yet. But I focused on one of the houses there, which is the Christopher Townsend house. And that situation, in my opinion, is extremely interesting. And if you're interested in it, you can just go down there and look around and see what you think. Water is now coming up through the storm drains in Newport at high tide in stormy days, flooding the streets. And houses their basements are chronically flooded, even if they have a sump pump going. So the Christopher Townsend house has 9 or 10 inches of water in its basement, even though a sump pump's running day and night in there. So you have to think about how are we going to deal with this long term? And I think we're facing put it this way, business as usual is already impossible, and it's going to be obviously impossible soon. So that's what the new book is about, is, all right, we've dug ourselves into this mess. What's the best way to deal with it? And what steps can we take going forward that will minimize the cost to society and the cost to nature and so on?
So I have a question, and then I'm going to get to the other books as well as back to the new one. Are people just simply indifferent to the rise in seawater, to the rise in the temperature, and therefore we're not exploring or finding the solutions long term?
Well, I think there are some ideas that are just too horrible to contemplate. The idea that your house is doomed to fall into the ocean, I think it's too horrible to contemplate. And unless it's going to happen tomorrow, people kind of push it aside. But there's a very interesting, I had a fellowship at Harvard, and I taught there for years, actually. And I met a very interesting man there at the business school whose name is Max Bazerman. And he gave a talk about something he calls predictable surprises. And I put this in my last book, and I'm going to put it in the next book. And a predictable surprise for Max is something that is some disastrous thing that is staring us in the face. And yet we don't do anything about it. And because he was at the business school, his approach was disastrous business decisions or practices or so on that led to, horrible things. Enron went out of business because it made a stupid decision about where it was going to get its accounting, its accounting help from. But anyway, in a predictable surprise, that something bad is coming, but not instantly. It's not coming instantly. You could avoid it somehow, but avoiding it exerts a cost. It's going to be painful. People are going to have to pay more taxes. They're not going to be able to develop things the way they want. They might have to, move their house inland. They might have to do any number of things, all of which are painful. If you are a politician or a regulator and you want to do what I would say, the right thing, you have to impose that pain on people. But the benefit, so they experience the cost immediately. The benefit that they derive, they might get like 20 years from now when some terrible thing their house doesn't fall into the ocean because they've moved it. If the benefit happens, far enough in the future, the politician who made the decision to inflict the pain may be out of office. They may even be dead. And if the benefit is that some terrible thing that was going to happen has not happened, people may not even be aware that they had a benefit. The only thing that they're aware of is they experience the pain. So it takes a highly principled leader, public official or leader, I would say, to inflict the pain under these kinds of circumstances. And I think what we're doing on the coast is a real good example of that, because the amount of money that can be made from what I would say is misguided development of land right on the water is virtually infinite. And so it's very hard to turn away from that, because someone tells you years from now you'll be unhappy you made this decision. So
one of the interesting things I read over the weekend was 53% of homes over, maybe it was a higher number, now I just messed it up, but over $1 million are being sold to out-of-state people who are coming in and buying $1 million homes. I just did a real estate roundup of houses that sold in Newport. Some of the most expensive homes are selling in the Point. And yes, you would think some of these homes are being bought by out-of-towners who are coming in and probably may not understand exactly, what they're going to have to do to remedy this situation or prevent this situation or what path of destruction they're in.
Well, people don't think long-term. I think Americans in particularly don't think long-term. We think short-term. And also there are some people who have so much money that it really does, if their house falls in, oh, well, never mind, I'll get another one. I can't, that's a concept I have difficulty getting my mind around, but there's no question that these people exist. And I'll bet you a lot of them are buying property in Newport. But, it's the example of, we're not going to deal with that now because we're not having the problem now. We might have a problem later, but that will be later. So I don't know. But yeah. The interesting thing is you are starting very, very, very slowly to see people advertise coastal property and say that it has high elevation, which means that somebody is aware of this. I think light is slowly dawning. But, if I could buy a house right on the water, am I going to tell you I would never be tempted to do that? Of course not. I would be thrilled, so.
Do you feel any encouragement with the change in administration, presuming it will happen?
Well, first of all, it will happen. It's complete. The idea that our elections could be subverted by some kind of a military coup is so unacceptable that I don't even think we should entertain the thought. It's not happening. He's going to be sworn in on, for good or ill, Joe Biden will be inaugurated on January 20th. The one thing I don't know, to my knowledge, I haven't heard him say anything in particular about coastal areas, but he does acknowledge that climate change is real and has to be combated. And that's a big change from the current administration. And we basically have, I can't say that we've lost 4 years, because people have kind of been voting with their feet on this issue more and more and more. People are starting to figure it out, and states have taken action and so on. But it's going to be more helpful when the federal government is on board with this idea, because the situation is with sea level rise is already bad. It's getting worse, and the worsening is accelerating. It's outstripping even the gloomiest predictions that people made for it. It's happening faster. So that we have to do whatever we can to slow that down. And that's going to require all kinds of action on climate.
Corey, tell us about the other books, and then I really do want to get back to climate change, because it's such a huge part of our lives.
So the second book, which is called Am I Making Myself Clear? It's a guide for researchers on talking to the public. And that book came about because I would, very often I would be asked to give a talk to a group of scientists or researchers somewhere. And so I would give a talk about, how we do things at the Times, what's our idea of a good story, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And in the questions and answers, the scientists would always say, you people make so many mistakes. You get everything wrong. You're just, totally awful. You only hype the news. You do this, you do that, blah, blah, blah. How come you're so horrible? And so I would always say to them, I am the very first person in any room to admit that we don't always get things completely correct. We make mistakes. Every human who has ever lived has made mistakes. And then the first thing I would do is say to them, if you saw that we made a mistake, did you tell us? Did you call me up and say, by the way, you got something wrong in there? And they would say, no, it's pointless. And I'd say, well, how do you think we're supposed to learn these things unless someone brings them to our attention? And the other thing I said was, you're talking to, typically, I would be the science editor of the New York Times. I was certain it was true at the time, and I think it probably is still true, the largest and the most lavishly supported lay language science news, organization on the planet. We are at the top of the game. This is the best it is. There isn't anybody who's, there are other people who are as good, but really there isn't any better. So this is what you're going to get. What my message to them was, if you see a problem, the only people who can, at this point, start to correct the problem are you all, the researchers. And that was true from the very beginning when I started doing these talks. And it's more and more and more true as journalism has hollowed out. The Projo used to have a full-time science writer and a full-time health writer and a full-time environment writer. It doesn't have any of those things now. So covering all of the subjects is just really hard. And in the absence of that kind of thing, we need as much help from the researchers as we can get. But they're terrible at it. They don't really know. A lot of them are not very good at it. There are some who are good. Very often their colleagues deride them as publicity hounds, which I think is really unfortunate. So the purpose of this book is to just to basically preach a sermon to researchers and say, you have an affirmative obligation of citizenship to participate in the important debates of our time, number one. And number two, you have to learn how to do it. It's not, you have to consider this a task that's important. If you're going to be interviewed on the radio, or if you're going to be, appear on television, or if you're going to write an op-ed or something like that, you have to prepare for that the way you would prepare for a scientific presentation. To do the same thing, but to put the time and effort into it. So that's what this book is. And it offers, helpful hints on how to deal with reporters, how to write an op-ed. Suppose you want to write a book, what should you think about, et cetera. Do you want to run for public office? That kind of thing. Which actually I think is the great, great, great tragedy that we have so few scientists and engineers and medical people in holding public office. I think that's really sad. one of the many, in my opinion, erroneous ideas that are accepted truths in the research community is that once you leave the bench, so to speak, once you leave your research job for even a short period of time, you will never be able to come back and catch up with progress. I don't believe there's any reason at all to embrace that idea, but it is widely believed. So people they won't even like run for Congress for a couple of terms because they'll never be a scientist again. That doesn't happen.
Corey, do you think that there ought to be an educational component for people going through a science program at some point, with the idea of becoming a scientist, on how to communicate with the general public?
Definitely, yes, definitely. And I've done. I actually started years ago. I got this idea that we should do something like this, and I tested it out in 3 formats: one at Brown, one at MIT, and one at the Graduate School of Oceanography at URI. And they got a very enthusiastic response. And I taught seminars at Harvard. And people who were in them, they will still come up to me and say, "Boy, that was so helpful. I can believe it." But it's not valued in the research community. It's not. And when I taught it, my idea was it would be required, but you wouldn't get a grade for it. And they said, no, it has to be graded and it can't be required. So what happened was the people who were drawn to my seminars were people who had basically already drunk the Kool-Aid, which is not the point. You need to spread this message to people who have not got that message. But anyway, that's how that came about. And then the third one was that had a kind of convoluted history, but it morphed into something that was, all right, so am I making myself clear, is how to tell scientists how to communicate with the lay public. And this book is how to tell members of the lay public what to make of it when people make a scientific or a technical claim. How can you personally look at that claim and start to, answer the question, do I believe this or not? Or how am I going to find out whether this is reasonable or not? And it's kind of a guide to that. And it has all kinds of, I think, useful and interesting material in it. Even, from really mundane, how to read a scientific study, more complex, how to tell if someone's actually an expert. People put themselves forward as experts, but are they really? How can you tell? And that kind of thing. And I was thrilled when the Los Angeles Times named it one of the 20 best books of the year it came out. So that was a real treat. But anyway, that book is in print still. Also, that's called Making Sense of Science. So, and it has a lot of, there's a lot of stuff in there about vaccines, about people's wildly erroneous ideas about cancer risk, all kinds of issues that we have accepted lines of reasoning on that may or may not be correct.
How much of our problem today, when we take a look at this incredible split in our country over the coronavirus, for that matter, and over people who are unwilling to accept the science, comes down to a lack of understanding, lack of communication, and maybe even a conscious effort not to become knowledgeable for fear that it's too difficult to understand?
Well, one of the things I say in the Am I Making Myself Clear book is that science and mathematics both are badly taught in the United States, all the way up to the college level. And there's a lot to say about that, but I'll just say that when in high school, for example, a lot of people's experience with high school science and high school math has left them alternately bored out of their skulls or feeling stupid. So they don't, when now they grow up and it's like, I'm not going to bother with that stuff. I never liked it and I didn't understand it anyway. So that's unfortunate. In college, too many science departments have courses that you must pass if you want to major in the field. And the courses are designed to weed people out. That's their purpose, which to me is like, it's insane. I can name courses at Brown that do this. It's crazy. We should be drawing people in, not attempting to boot them out. So, so that's an issue. But there is a growing realization that the things that make people accept ideas, some ideas, and not accept them, climate is a good example, may not have to do with how much access to information that they have. In climate, for example, it seems very possible that what motivates people on that subject has to do with their feelings about how much regulation there should be in the world, what is the purpose of government generally, that kind of thing. People who do not believe that, people who believe in Reagan's words that the government is the problem, not the solution, they are inclined to denigrate any kind of an effort that has to do with regulation. And it seems to me anyway that there's no way we're going to get our hands around this climate thing without regulating some things. So they will be opposed to it virtually no matter what. And what happens in a situation like that is people will construct rationales to defend an idea that they're holding on to because that's the idea they really value. For example, regulation is a bad thing. So they will construct whatever they need to do intellectually in order to support that view. And so they turn away from it. And in some cases, research shows the more data you give these people, the more they will say, this conspiracy, this climate conspiracy is even more widespread than I realized. So to me, this is a real serious problem, and not just climate, on all kinds of issues. But it's my belief that the only way to deal with it is that people on different sides have to be able to engage with each other. And that's, I think, the biggest problem we have with our divided politics now, is that people don't feel like they can engage with the other side. I have a friend who worked on the House Science Committee not too long ago. And he was very knowledgeable about the government's approach to science legislation and so on. And he said that it was always possible to reach across the aisle and talk to the other side. He happened to be a Republican, but you could always reach across the aisle and talk to the other side about whatever the issue was and figure out, okay, how are we going to make this, make something happen here that will be useful. But since about 20 years, maybe a little less, but really the divide is so extreme that each side regards the other side as morally degenerate practically. And you can't negotiate with somebody you think is morally degenerate. And we have to alter our politics so that we can talk to people on the other side, even if we don't agree with them. And I'm hopeful because of this Problem Solvers Caucus in the Congress that was a moving force behind the COVID bill that was finally passed,
right,
whenever it was. And I had never heard of these people until I was at dinner. This was over a year ago because you could go to dinner with a man named Gary Sass, who you may know, who is a prominent in Republican politics in Rhode Island. And he may even have been working with those people, but in any event, he knew about them. And he explained that their idea was they decided they would have a caucus and it would have 24 Democrats and 24 Republicans. And their idea was there are lots of issues that face us that we can act on. They can be acted on, and we can find a way to act on it if we talk to each other about it. And maybe we'll end up with something that nobody is crazy about, but it moves the ball forward in a good direction. And so I was really pleased to see them turn up, in a kind of starring role in this financial legislation. And I hope we see more of that going forward. And I think it's possible, given his record, that Biden might be able to encourage that. He seems to want to. He, according to what he says, anyway, he seems to want to. So, but the proof is going to be in the pudding. Who knows? So,
now, hopefully, maybe out of all this chaos will come a little bit more willingness for people to really work towards solutions rather than work towards political gain.
that is my fervent hope. And you know what else, Frank? This is what I think is the great lesson of this pandemic, is that the people who are the most important people in our society are the people who are stocking the shelves in the grocery store, driving the trucks to get the food to the grocery store, keeping the streets clean, washing the floors in the hospital. I mean, doing this kind of work that does not pay a lot of money, but it's crucial. And I hope we recognize those people need to be paid more money, and we
if throw in your nursing home workers, those people are going in, they can't afford not to go to work.
No, absolutely.
And if you don't pay them enough money, if you don't give them enough benefits, they're going to keep coming in whether they are sick or not.
Well, we can't afford not to have them, because we can't live without food in the grocery store. So we have to. I hope that to me that was my kind of the great lesson of the pandemic, and I hope we take it to heart now.
The sad part is that the federal minimum wage is a little over $7 an hour, and in many states, particularly across the South, the federal minimum wage is a state minimum wage, and it's impossible to live on that.
No, it's ridiculous. It's what you said. It's impossible. It's not a living wage.
Tell me a little bit more about your new book, Coastal Land Use. Where are you with that, and when do you expect it out?
Say again?
When do you expect it to be complete?
Oh God, Frank. This is my other great concept from the pandemic, and I have it bad. Pandemic lassitude. So I'm totally unable to get out of my own way. But I have finished a proposal. I gave it to my agent. He made a few useful suggestions for it. And I was sidetracked by other writing assignments from that meeting was in February. And ever since I've been sidetracked on other writing assignments. So I'm still at the stage of trying to produce a proposal. But I'm confident that it will find a publisher, because my track record is good with books, and it's a hot topic. But I have no idea when it will be out. I have to write the stupid thing first. So, and that's not happening. But maybe now that there's a new year and so on, things will move faster. But the working title of the book is The Fate of the Coast. And it's just about all kinds of things that we have to confront now. We're going to lose a lot of habitat that we care about with rising seas. We're going to lose a lot of infrastructure. We're already losing it. And we're going to have to figure out whether we're going to pay to reinforce the stuff that we already have right at the water's edge, or whether we're going to move stuff inland. And if we decide to move inland, what can be moved inland and what can't? And all of these are very complicated questions. We have to decide whether tourism activities are, obviously they're profitable, but are they so damaging environmentally that we can't afford those profits anymore? So there are lots of questions like that the book will talk about.
Corey, I have just so many more questions, but I don't want to keep you forever. But here's a concern of mine, and tell me if you think I'm off base. The journal, as you mentioned, doesn't have a science writer, doesn't have a healthcare writer. I mean, I remember, what was it? Sallie Greenberg. Remember Sallie Greenberg? Sallie Greenberg would write a book with every story, but a well-respected science writer or a healthcare writer. We don't have those interpreters anymore. So they're not at the Journal. They may be at the Times. They may be at the Washington Post. They may be scattered here and there, but there's nobody out there who is on a regular basis being both the watchdog and the interpreter of all of these concerns back to the general public. Radio will give you a soundbite. TV will give you a neat little video clip, and you know there are a few online publications that have a robust enough staff to be able to devote a tremendous amount of time and effort to this. Where do we get those interpreters? Where do we get those advocates?
Well, there are still some publications that are doing this kind of work. In fact, the Globe, I think, just within the last couple of days, announced a new. Sorry, that's my neighbor's dog at the back door. They had just announced a new initiative with. They have an online publication called Stat, which has been running for some time now. Very good healthcare reporting. The head of it is someone I worked with in the Washington Bureau at the Times. Very good. They've hired more people in Rhode Island. The Projo, the public radio, the Rhode Island Public Radio outlet is increasing its staff. So there are people who are, finding ways to do this kind of thing. I don't know what the answer is. I always used to tell my students that there will always be a market. Somebody will always be willing to pay. People will always be willing to pay for timely, accurate information. And so there will always be a place for journalists in the world. But I did not anticipate the vast changes that the internet brought about. So I don't know. You may feel like you have to seek people out, but information is there. I mean, that's kind of what this third book is. Well, how am I supposed to find out about this? Well, here are some suggestions. It's not as easy. It was, when you think about, well, when we worked together at the Projo, what people had delivered to their houses every day,
right?
For days, really, was just an astonishing array of very high quality information, and it's too bad that business model is broken.
Corey, do you have a website?
I should, but I don't.
And Ryan, I'm going to ask your question. Well, where can people get your books?
This is a funny story. Frank, do you remember someone named Dante Ionata who we worked with?
Dante and I are good friends. Yeah.
So Dante is a former Projo reporter. My last book came out, and I happened to be in Books on the Square in Wayland Square, and I was a completely unrelated book buying venture, and I think I was in the travel section or something. Anyway, I was in there looking for a book about something or other, and I heard this voice in the front of the store saying, "Excuse me, do you have Cornelia Dean's book, Making Sense of Science?" And I'm like, oh, so I ran out, and it was Dante. So anyway, yes, those places either have it or they can order it for you, or you can get them all on Amazon. So
that's great. Corey, anything else you think that we may have missed that you think is important?
I think the one thing I kind of expected a question about this, and that is, we hear, well, I'd like to say two things. Do I have time to make 2 points?
Absolutely.
Okay, so we hear a lot. I hear this all the time, that people have lost respect for science. They don't trust science. They don't believe in science. They don't, whatever. In my opinion, there's no evidence for that. The surveys have shown for decades that when you ask people, what organizations in our country do you trust? At the very, 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 very top, and it's been like they're up there for years and years and years and years, is science and scientific research. Right under it is medical research and people in the practice of medicine. The only category of people who come close to that is our military, which is also highly trusted. And I think we're learning right now for good reason. But so that's one. I think people actually are prepared to believe in science. The benefits of it are too obvious. What a lot of people feel is, and I happen to be one of them, that technological advances are moving faster than our moral or philosophical or ethical ability to deal with them. I think, and that was actually the real reason for the making sense of science. I think there are questions that need to be discussed on the discussion needs to be broad and wide ranging among a broad and wide ranging bunch of people, not a few self-selected experts in a windowless room somewhere. Like, how should vaccines be distributed? How should we ration healthcare, which we're already doing in places like California? That needs a bigger conversation. So that, I think, that's an issue. But people trust science. And the other thing is, and this is totally just my opinion, so it's worth what you pay for it. I hear people say all the time the country is falling apart. And I don't believe the country is falling apart. I think we're seeing right now how strong the country is, because we're seeing what we have been living with, and yet it's standing. So that's my view of that.
Good words, Corey. Well, they are. And I hope you're right. I think out of this chaos may actually come some greater understanding and maybe a much more productive government.
Well, that's my hope. But you know what that means? All of us have to step up. We can't leave this, even if it's only just writing a letter to our co-host or something. We have to get involved in it. We can't just be sitting around hoping that something pleasant will occur. So, anyway.
Corey, thank you very much. We appreciate the time this morning, and we will catch up soon. And eventually, we'll get back to our geezers' lunches.
I know. I miss them. I miss all of that kind of thing. Just being with people. I can't wait. Thank you. It was
Thank you.
To be able to be here. Thank you.
Well, great to have you.
Thank you so much. All right, Mr. Prosnitz. Well, good chat. And if people missed any portion of this interview, maybe they caught on late, you can go back and watch it afterward on our website, whatsupnewp.com, as well as on our Facebook page and on our YouTube channel.
Yeah, I'm going down to my basement. I have this chemistry set. I'm going to make a volcano.
Okay. Be careful. Be a little careful. But I could have just talked about Newport issues for the full 45 minutes.
Well, I think Corey's very, very bright. She's clearly knows her subject matter. I think it's well worth at some point bringing her back on just to talk about Newport issues. And she, she's a Rhode Islander. She fully understands. I was impressed that she took us along the coast and told us all the things we need to pay attention to. But yeah, we should do that.
All right. Well, we will plan another time to do that. And just quickly looking at the comments, Edward, fascinating interview. Well, we appreciate it. And by the way, you can provide your feedback during any of the conversations right in the comments section on our Facebook feed. And also, if you know an author, have an author, or know of somebody that's not an author but is fascinating and want us to talk to them, send us an email, ryan@whatsupnewp.com.
Or write a book really quickly, and then we'll talk to you.
There we go. All right, Mr. Prosnitz, and we will continue this series when we continue it, as we continue to line up interviews with some outstanding authors and writers and entertainers. All right, Mr. Prosnitz, have a good day.
Thank you. Take care.
All right. Until next time, again, you can watch this interview, share it with your friends, family, and loved ones. It is available on whatsupnewp.com. I want to thank Charter Books for sponsoring this series. Charter Books is our sponsor for the What's Up Newp Author series. They are opening at 8 Broadway this winter. So just in a couple months, you can shop them now online at chartersbookstore.com. Enjoy free local delivery and in-store pickup. Thanks for